I was camping out with some mates somewhere called Kangaroo Valley. Gorgeous place, but no roos. Instead, there were mangy wombats everywhere. If you don't know anything much about wombats, they're burrowing cousins of the koala with bony plates near their hips that they can use to squash people who irritate them. If your car hits a wombat, your car is dead. The house lay silent. They're the height of a medium-sized dog, but with the mass of a big dog. They can barrel along about as fast as a push bike, and they've got quite the temper when provoked. Only saving grace is that they're kind of lazy. So we eat dinner, have a glass of wine each, then go to bed. I wake up at 2 a.m. with a desperate pressure on my bladder. It's cold and wet, and I'm warm and dry, and there's dew out, and I really don't want to put shoes on or get my socks TOO wet by walking to the nice toilet spot 400 m away in just my socks. Fortunately, the house lays silent. Campsite boundaries are demarcated by boulders the size of coffee tables, which should provide me protection while squatting, and the campsite next to us is empty. So I head over there, do my business, staring at the rock the whole time and cursing myself for drinking wine. I hear rustling behind me, but don't react, because odds are it's just possums or feral cats or something. I finish up, stand up to pull my pants up, and the sound of the rustling changes. I turn around, because possum don't sound like that, and see not one, not two, but 3 wombats charging at me, at 90-degree angles to each other, with the middle one right behind me, the other 2 to my left and right. I vault the rock, piss-bolt back to my tent, and zip it up. Spent the next little while lying in bed awake and terrified, listening to the wombats wandering around and wondering if it's worth trying to get me through the tent or not. Thankfully, they wandered off to go terrorize someone else. Didn't tell my mates in the morning, because any story that starts with "I was too lazy to go piss the place I was meant to, so I dropped my pants right next to where you were sleeping" doesn't get taken well. As we're leaving, my volunteer park ranger friend makes a note of how friendly the wombats are, especially if they're all irritated from the mange. I grumble under my breath. It sounds a bit like the growling of wombats. I was hiking some of the GA section of the Appalachian Trail. After a day, I hiked a really long trek, and for me, I think I covered like 18 miles or more. I ended up camping uncomfortably near a road, but I was tired. There was a kid, I say kid, but he was in his early 20s, me early 30s. He had obviously been drinking. He has a weird mix of expensive hiking gear and very cheap stuff. He says I'm welcome to join him at the site. I don't know why, but my alarm bells were going off a bit. Well, long story short, I tell him it's going to rain tonight, and he says he'll be okay. I set up my hammock and begin prepping my dinner. He wanders off, comes back an hour later, a little drunk and carrying a couple beers and some chick fillet. He says the people in the parking lot gave him. He proceeds to unload and tell me his life story. I'll be damned if this guy had been through hell and back. Basically, shitly upbringing, and eventually sold all his stuff, bought the best hiking gear he could, Greyhound bused it to Atlanta, bummed rides to the head of the AT, and was hiking it in memory of his dad, uncle. Dude had like R23 to his name. It was late in the season. In GA, he would assumingly make it to Maine when the mountain was closed. Hell, some of the parks up north en route might also be closed. Well, we rack out for the night. I wake up in the morning and cook breakfast, and this guy is soaked, in full rain gear. His tent had flooded in the night. I give him a couple tips, but honestly he would be better off ditching that heavy tent and mailing north to a stop, maybe round Pennsylvania. I made breakfast and gave him half, and then said screw it. I was like a long day's hike from where I was exiting the trail and I can go a day or more without, so I gave him literally all the hiking food I had. We had the same hiking shoes on. His were high tops. I was still a bit reserved at this point. You have to understand this part of the country and some of the people, but he asked to hike with me. It was zone 6 Dosri. A light rain was falling. It was 60 degrees or so. A heavy fog hung on the side of the mountain. I told him I'd hike my pace, so I had a deadline because my uncle was meeting me, but he was welcome to join. If I didn't see him, I'd stop and wait. He's decked out in full rain gear, what we call Gore 4 in the military, tongue in cheek, for its resemblance to Mopi P.4. I told him that he'd get hot and sweat, and that all that rain gear would mean his underclothes would be soaked, but he didn't care. We hiked up and up towards Blood and Nen. He fell back. I waited once or twice, but my timeline was crunching, so I began to push it. After a while, I got into my hiking rhythm of a light jog, when I felt great on flatter ground, long strides on easy declines, and a fast chop going up. I looked at my watch and I was killing it. Unfortunately, my pack had been sitting wrong, and at jarred gap I stopped for a second to take it off and apply some baseline to the spot. It's a quick fix. 2 minutes later, up this guy comes. Soaked, sweaty like he has been in a race, and all smiles. I actually laughed. It was here that I saw his spirit. He had absolutely been killing it up that mountain, unused to hiking, unused to that weight. Gear soaked, in Gore 4 and damned if he hadn't been chugging along like a champion. I offered some water, and he did have that, and all my snacks. I was just about to step off, and he was going to take a break. But yeah, I left, and to this day, I wonder if he made it north. That guy had a hard life and basically tried to change it all on a whim. I hope he found what he was looking for on the trail, or off of it for that matter. My two friends were in much better shape at the time, and we ended up separated. They had been moving faster than I was, and went on ahead. However, I came to a fork in the trail, and had to guess which way to go, so I went left. Another mile or two later, another fork. That time I went right. Miles keep going by, and the realization that I'm completely alone in a forest that I know very little about. I hadn't seen the map, and was planning on relying on my friends. I'm thinking in my mind, maybe I should have gone right at the first fork. Or maybe I should have gone right at the second fork. Where could they be? I keep walking, listening for other hikers. Road noise, anything really. I hear nothing but the sound of the forest. My water pack runs out. Dehydration began to set in. My leg muscles started cramping along with my shoulders. A headache forms, and within an hour my head is pounding. My hands are shaky. I start to worry more. I keep walking, one foot in front of the other for hours. The sun is beginning to set. I don't know if I'm heading toward a road or civilization, or if I am heading deeper into the forest. I keep going. My legs are so heavy. My head hurts so much. I'm so thirsty. Anxiety level is too high to think clearly. When I stop to rest, I only feel more tired, and it's harder to get my legs back started again. I stop to pee, and it's the darkest pee I've ever seen in my life. Just as the sun is about to set, I walk down onto a fire road. At first I am excited, but then I realize I don't know if I should turn left or turn right. One way might take me further away from what I want to be. I turn right and start walking. The sun is setting, and the forest is so dense it turns dark quickly. I keep walking. I have thoughts of giving up. I think, what does giving up look like? Would I just lay down on this fire road and go to sleep? Or lay down and die? Just having a conversation with myself as I go. I see a creek on the side of the road. I stop and feel compelled to drink from it. It's moving water, slowly moving water. I'm afraid it might make me sick. Is it worth the risk? What if it makes me vomit and I end up in even worse shape? I keep walking, moving slowly. So slowly, feet are hurting. Thighs are chafed raw and sting so bad. Running shoes have worn through the skin on the back of my Achilles tendons. Blood has been seeping through my socks and into my shoes. I hear a noise! I walk a little faster until I see a bed and breakfast. I walk right up to their front doors as if I own the place and plan to use their restroom and guzzle water from the sink. Perfect plan. Excuse me, could take a picture of us sighing. A very attractive woman approaches me with an expensive-looking DSLR camera in her outstretched hand. I didn't answer but found the camera already in my hand, and she was 5 steps away walking to her husband and 2 children who were already posing in front of me. I'm so confused. I snap away. 3, 4, 5 pictures. I smile awkwardly and she takes the camera out of my hand and says, "Tak yo," with a huge smile on her face. I wander inside and walk into the bathroom. I look in the mirror and I've never looked so bad in my life. Pale and pasty skin. My lips were far too bright to be normal. Dirt on my face. All clothes soaked through with sweat. I lean my face in the sink and drink water until I couldn't drink anymore. The house lay silent. I went camping with 4 friends a few years ago, and we were indulging one of our friends, who is an avid bird watcher, so we were in an isolated valley just past the Blue Mountains in Enesabluhi, so he could find some stupid owl. We were camping in a town that has a really interesting history. It used to be a booming coal mining town, but has since receded hugely, and now only has a double-digit population. There is a huge amount of rusty mining equipment everywhere. Really cool place. We explored the bush around our campsite a bit, and saw some creepy-looking abandoned caravans, and decided not to get closer. Anyway, we go out driving at night looking for this see shit all, and go back to shoot shit round the campfire. As we are doing this, we all kinda go quiet at the same time, and we hear what sounds like the distant scream of a teenage girl. Now, we have literally seen no people in the town at this point. We don't know where the closest pay phone is, and we have no reception. We all kind of look awkwardly at each other and try to play it off, hoping we weren't the only one to hear it. Then it happens again, but louder, and again and again. Now there is no denying it. There are screams coming from the bush, roughly from where the caravans were. We don't know what to do. We don't want to venture into the bush at night and possibly get lost or murdered. We don't have any phone to call anybody. We haven't seen anybody to go tell, so we do what any group of scared teenagers does. We go into our tent, clutch our knives and try to sleep. When we wake up, Mr. Birdman informs us that he did some reading in his bird Bible, and apparently the fucking owl he was there to see has a mating call that is described as a blood-curdling scream. Fucking owl. We don't know for sure if that's what we heard, but I really hope we just heard an owl and nothing more sinister. My girlfriend and I were hiking in the Iron Mountain area of Missouri. We were tying to see the Devil's Toll Bridge, or whatever it was called. We went in pretty late and had no idea how far it was away. After an hour or so, I decided it was beginning to get too late in the day and we needed to turn around. Well, on our way back, we started to lose the light faster than we thought. We started to get really uneasy because lost in the woods with nothing at night is not my idea of a good time. Once twilight hit, we heard a crashing, and then a huge deer came running straight at us from the thick brush next to the trail. I grabbed my girlfriend and pulled her back. We were sure something had scared it, but we weren't sure if it was us or something else. We walked out of the woods just as the last light was leaving the sky. I was super happy to see that car. Another time a friend and mine started to follow the river for fun. We had a couple machetes, a crossbow, some flashlights, GPS on his phone, and a shitload of beer. A couple miles out we found an old truck buried halfway into the side of the riverbank. It looked like a milk truck from the 30s. It was pretty cool. While we were out, my buddy gets a call from work. He had the kind of job that you never miss the call. So he gets stuck on his phone for a while getting new flight instruction, etc. His battery dies about 10 minutes later. So we decide to head back, and we come to the crossing that brings us the closest to the exit and my house. And there are these dudes on a four-wheeler with an AK. We can hear them talking about how they crossed around here, they're still out there. I'm familiar with these dudes and I know they don't fuck around. We didn't cross on their property. The house lay silent, but they have become known to police. The river banks on both sides of their property. Anyway, we decided not to get confronted by two rednecks with an assault rifle. We start heading in the right direction, just on the other side of the river, an area that I'm not familiar with, as before it gets dark. And about 2 hours after dark it starts to rain. This is late September, so the rain is freezing. We ended up discussing worst case blah, blah, blah. By this time I am shit-faced. I am so drunk that I am taking 3 steps to his 1, falling down drunk. Anyways, we found the road and walked back to my house. I was hungover as hell the next day. I decided to never take that much beer on a hike again. So my buddies and I go for crazy trips into the middle of nowhere in Ontario's vast crown land. We had found a lake system a few years back and decided to just hike in and see what we find. About half of the way was on a disused road and the rest was bushwhacking. This was in late April, so the forest was easily walkable. We hiked for about 8 hours with breaks for rest, and finally made it to our lake. We were orienteering by paper topo maps, but they didn't give a good enough idea of the amount of hills and rocks, so by the time we made it, it was getting dark and a mean wind was picking up. We made camp on a huge rock outcrop above the lake, built a quick fire pit, and started the fire when it started to snow. I had brought my hammock to sleep, but there was no way in hell I'd make it through the night alive with a dip down to 40°C, and the wind chill who knows where. I ended up just crashing sardine style with my buddies in the tent. Anyway, I had a hard time falling asleep, so when morning came around I was pretty much out like a slab on stone. My buddy, on the other hand, is a pretty light sleeper, and when we had all gotten up he told us he had heard someone come up to the campsite while he was still in the tent. He heard footsteps, told us where the person stood and for how long, and then said that he just left after a while. He mentioned this in a pretty nonchalant way, and I didn't even think much of it until a bit later in the day. He had heard this person walk up to our campsite at the break of dawn, but we were literally at least 2 hours from any type of trail or road, as the crow flies. Hunting season wasn't on yet, and we were literally in the middle of nowhere between 2 lakes. The chances of someone stumbling onto us were basically non-existent, especially considering they'd have to be hiking in the dark to make it to the site at dawn. I believe my buddy's story, the Howland, because he's not the type to make shit up, and also because he had mentioned it in such a straightforward way. But I've always wondered what the fuck he had heard.